Awesome, awesome. So first question is, what is your basic teaching philosophy?
Wow, that's a pretty good question. I think teaching and learning is the heart of higher ed. It is the heart of what we do in higher education. And I think that teaching has got to be about helping people discover their passions, about identify their greatest talents, becoming motivated to want to develop those talents and to develop who they are to the best of their ability. So I think teaching is a process that tries to combine all of that. How do you ignite passion, ignite curiosity, help people develop talent, bring the knowledge and the experiences that helps them develop their skills, their abilities, their attitudes, their perspectives. So that's a pretty good question to start out with. Your philosophy. That's a pretty. It's sort of hard to get that down into a succinct few sentences.
How long have you been teaching for?
I've been teaching in one form or another for 40 years. I started out teaching in high school, and so I've taught everything from 9th grade through PhD. I've worked I've worked in 4 different universities, and went to several others. So higher ed's sort of been my life.
What made you go, first of all, to become a teacher? What was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was very clear. It was very clearly in my life a sense of calling. It was for me it was a spiritual journey to sort of discover what I do, what I could do, what I love, what I wanted to do. And when I was in college, I was personally in a lot of turmoil about what to do with myself and what direction to take, for me it was a spiritual discernment in a way that led me to this very clear sense of calling, and I've never wavered from that. That was 40 years ago, a little over.
Wow.
And that I've never doubted that clarity. I've doubted all kinds of other things, and I've had lots of different job situations and circumstances, and all that has been very, very interesting. But at the core, the calling to be an educator, to be a teacher, has always been very clear to me, and it's sort of been a guide, if you will. It's sort of I know that I want to keep doing that in some way, in some form. And I started out teaching in high school, and then I got into student affairs, where I began to realize, and as a practitioner, I realized, gosh, you do so much. Teaching and learning is never confined to a classroom space. And that's, to me, the beauty of student affairs work, is that you get to be an educator outside of a formal, organized, institutionalized kind of a setting, which means you've got to bring a lot of creativity and a lot of questions, and so it's fun to have had experiences of working both inside a formal educational context in terms of classrooms, and to work in informal context in terms of residence halls or retreats or programs that we do with students outside the classroom.
You mentioned student affairs. Was there something significant that made you go that route from a teacher? Or?
That was all accidental.
Okay.
That was accidental. I moved to Texas to go to seminary in Fort Worth, but I needed a job to get myself through school. Right? We all have to work to make ends meet, and I had some friends, a couple of friends from that I gotten to know, who worked as residence hall directors at Texas Christian University, and said, you might want to think about applying to do that. It's a great job because you can go to school during the day if you need to, and you get, And I thought, that sounds pretty cool. I mean, sounds convenient. And so I, lo and behold, got hired and didn't really have a clue what student affairs was as a profession. I mean, I had a sense of what an RD might do. I mean, I'd gone to college. In fact, I was a roommate. I had a roommate for a year who was an RA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had sort of I never was an RA.
Sure.
I got involved in other kinds of student leadership stuff, not residence life. But I had a roommate who was very involved. So I sort of had seen that world. So I wasn't clueless. But nor did I have anywhere near a coherent sense of what the profession is about or that. But I got hired. And then I did a lot of on-the-job training, if you will. I mean, I worked in a housing residence life department that was very student development oriented. They did a lot of staff development, a lot of training around student development issues. So it was like constant learning all the time. And then I began to see all these connections to my background in education and my background as a teacher. I just began to see all of these things converging and connecting. And then I was at the same time in seminary preparing for, I didn't know what, but some sort of role in ministry. And so then that's just another convergence. Like, wow, what a great opportunity to be living with students and around students, and so just lots of things converged. And I was in residence life for several years, and it really, so I landed in it, I would say, somewhat either accidentally or providentially, however you want to think about that. But it was definitely a life changer because it just led me into a whole new career that I've really been in ever since. You know? And that's why I'm not one who's I'm not real keen on the notion that you should plan out your life and that you should, you know, that's where I want to be and here are the steps I'm going to take to get there. I mean, having aspirations and goals is, I think, very important. But I think equally as important is being open to change the plan, because you don't know what kind of circumstances are going to come or what kind of opportunities are going to come that may really shift your whole way of thinking or your even the possibilities that you see for yourself. So that's kind of what happened with me. I just sort of got into the field unintentionally, but I'm very grateful at the same time.
Makes sense. You want me?
Yeah.
Go.
So with such an extensive background in higher education,
Right.
teaching, student affairs, do you feel it's still worthwhile for students to go to college, the traditional 4-year route, with the amount of debt that they leave with?
Yeah, that's a huge dilemma, the debt thing, and I look at this now even as a parent because I've had two sons go through college. One is out and graduated and has some debt, and the other one is a junior and has some debt, not lots, but I think about all that, and it's like, what's the economics of higher ed, I think, are really problematic for us. I think that's one of our most critical issues that's facing higher ed as we from now into the future. And you can have that conversation as from a policy perspective at the 10,000 foot level. You can have that conversation at a individual family. Gosh, how are my kids going to pay off their debt level, right? Because we're the specific is part of the bigger picture. But your question is it worth it? Is it worth it? I have to say, on balance, I think yes, it's worth it. I mean, and what does it mean to be worth it? What is the value of an education? And we tend to think about that only economically. Are you going to make enough in your career and in your job to pay off your debt? I mean, are you gonna? Is it a good return on your investment in terms of dollars and cents, right? And I think the statistics still bear up that people with a college degree over a lifetime are going to make a lot more money than people without a college degree. And so yes, in that sense, I think it's still worth it. But I think there's some real limits to that, because not everyone who spends a fortune for a college degree is going to end up in a job that makes them a lot of money. And I think that I think that's problematic. You know, I think students who are graduating with $200,000 in debt without the prospects of good employment down the road, is that worth it? I have serious doubts about that. Of course, there's other ways to think about value, and value is not just economic value. So what is the value in simply being an educated person? What is the value in learning how to be a critical thinker? What's the value in having an awareness and knowing yourself better and knowing what you're... I mean, so there's a lot of personal value, I think, that comes from being an educated person, whether that translates into economic sense or not. So, you know, is it worth it? I think that's the question virtually every family is asking who's thinking about sending a kid to college. Is it going to be worth it? And I think that especially in the private sector, you know, we're pricing ourselves in some ways out of who's getting left behind in that mix concerns me a lot, because I think there's a lot of equity issues around, you know, who deserves to go to higher education, who deserves a college degree. I mean, I'm a huge advocate that I think college should be free for everybody. You know, I think that's a huge investment that as a society we should make in ourselves as a country. We should be investing in the education of our next generation. And it's not simply an individual benefit. I mean, you know, getting a college degree is not just good for the individual, it's good for our society to have educated people. But the politics of our country are not going to allow that in the foreseeable future, and so I don't have solutions. I mean, that's what everyone's sort of asking, like, where are we going with this? I think some solutions are going to emerge, though, because I think they're going to have to, and I think that technology and so much is changing in higher ed, and you probably have other questions about some of that, so I don't want to anticipate that, but things are changing, and I'm really curious about innovation and where and how can we innovate and do things differently. So yeah, I'm eager to see what you all are going to come up with about that. You're the next generation of leaders. It's going to be your job to figure that out.
Great answer. So that question kind of went into our next question, but so we're gonna skip that one, and then. So in today's society, do you believe that gaining work experience is more important than receiving an education, or kind of being enrolled in higher ed? Is it important to have internships while you're still in school so that you leave school with something on your resume, you know, instead of just that degree?
Yeah, it's not an either or. It's not an either or thing. We often think of, here's education over here, here's work over here. In the real world, there's really not a boundary between those things, because when you're working, you're learning. When you're at work and you're doing tasks, you're doing jobs, or you're doing things you may have not ever done before, you're learning. One of my favorite professors at UCLA used to say to us that every time you change jobs, you have a steep learning curve. And so throughout your adult life, your post-formal education life, once you're done with education and the rest of your career, the times in your life when you're going to have learning spurts are really going to come when you change jobs or change roles in the place you work. That there's so much learning that happens. So I'm a huge believer about the power of experiential learning. So experiential learning comes in the workplace, it comes in internships, it comes in study abroad, it comes in traveling, it comes in exposing yourself to new cultures and new situations. All of those kinds of experiences are very much a part of the educational process, and so they're not divorced from, they're not separate from what is happening formally in education. and I think part of where higher education may go is some recognition of the intersection of both of these things. You know, the uncollege movement, you know, of not, you know, not going to formal, you know, creating your own experience and your own pathway to learning. That's going to get some traction, and it's going to get more traction, because they're going to be they're going to be alternatives and other kinds of models emerging about that. I think a lot of kids go straight out of high school into college, and they're not really ready for the learning that they're going to be exposed to, and they miss so much because they don't have an experiential background that makes it relevant, and so they see they see what they're being forced to learn as being sort of irrelevant to them, and it probably is, you know, in many ways. So the experiential side of learning is really where I think you help people develop curiosity. I mean, I think curiosity is huge. And if people aren't excited about what they're learning and what's happening within them, education can be, if it's boring, it's bad. And it's not good for anybody. So the whole work, you know, part of your question was also about should there, you know, internships and all that. I just think the more of that can be integrated into the higher education experience, the better, because it's always about experience. I mean, in our field, we talk about theory and practice. You know, that's sort of a big catch-all term that says, yes, we study formally. We look at research, we look at theory, we look at how people are thinking about students and higher education institutions and how they work and what makes them tick and all that stuff. We study that academically, but it takes on meaning when you get to practice it experientially. When you're out there doing your work, working with students, working in departments and programs, it's where those two things then begin to converge with each other. You see the theory and the practice, and I think that should be true with the undergraduates. Where's the connection between the real world and what they are experiencing and what they're being asked to learn formally in a classroom or in a course of study. So that's a long answer. I don't know if I got to all the issues that are in that question, but it's a great question.
Do you want to stop one?
Hmm?
You want the last one?
I actually have one before the last
Oh,
one.
do you?
Yeah. It kind of leads us into the last one. Do you feel the value of a college degree? So, do you feel a college degree is as valuable as it was 10 years ago?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the degree is as valuable. I think the cost to get that degree has certainly gone up. So it comes back also then to, you know, cost benefit partly. But does it have value? Absolutely, it has value. I mean, when you look at the workforce projections about what, in our country at least, what is needed in the next 50 years, you see a steady decline in blue-collar labor types of jobs. That job market is going to continue to decline. What is on the incline are high skill kinds of jobs, which require higher education. And the demand for those jobs is going to continue to go up, and every projection I've seen has them going up. So, yes, absolutely, it has value. I think the question is going to be, are there going to be alternative routes to that kind of education that would prepare you for those kinds of jobs? Does it have to be a 4-year baccalaureate degree from a brick-and-mortar university to qualify you to be in those high school kinds of jobs or not? I think that's really where the higher education issue is going to come in. I think the demand for skills, the demand for knowledge, I mean, we're certainly in a knowledge economy, so, you know, the more of that you have, the more valuable you're going to be in the workforce, so yes. But higher education has lost its monopoly on knowledge. I mean, in the medieval world, the universities were the only place, they were the keepers of knowledge, right? Well, now everyone has a smartphone and can find Google. You know, I mean, everyone can access knowledge anywhere, anytime. and so we no longer have a monopoly. And yet we live in denial about that. We tend to think that we still do have this monopoly on information and knowledge. We don't. And other sources of that are going to emerge. That are going to begin to even legitimize and validate your learning, and so all kinds of alternatives are going to be emerging. I think being educated will still be held in very high value. Will that necessarily mean a 4-year degree is what proves that you are educated? Probably less and less.
So do you think that we will still need college in the next 15 years?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're gonna have college. We're gonna need college. I think what college is and what it looks like is going to slowly morph. I mean, certainly it's being driven a lot by technology. I mean, the information world is out there. I think some colleges are going to die because they don't adapt. But I think higher ed will adapt. It will find a way to adapt. It's still the pathway that I think the general public thinks of as a route into a career. And it is. I mean, we don't see higher enrollment numbers shrinking. We still see higher education numbers expanding. So yeah, I think the demand is going to be high. I mean, the cost is certainly a factor. That's a barrier for lots and lots of people. And so I think there are going to be lots of alternatives that are going to emerge and evolve. And I think higher ed is evolving and adapting in a way, and needs to. And I don't think we know yet what it's going to look like. I think the most creativity, the most innovation, the most reforming kinds of things have yet to be identified. I think we'll see some things happening in the next 10 years that will be maybe pretty significant.
Well,
I have a follow-up.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
So,
keep going.
as you see higher education morphing and changing, what do you think that's going to mean for the student affairs profession? How is that going to...
Yeah, we've got to morph and change too, don't we?
Yeah.
We have to go back to our core. I mean, the core of what we do. I mean, what is it we do? I mean, we tend to think in terms of roles and functions. I mean, in terms of traditional, you're a career counselor or an academic advisor or a residence hall director or a student. I mean, we think in those terms, but what is it, when we peel that back, what's underneath that? What is it that we're doing? Well, we're mentoring. We're working with students. We're working one-on-one. We're working in groups. We're helping students develop their talent and become the people that, in my theological perspective, the people that I think God intends for them to be. So there's a sacred part of our mission, I think. But at its core, it's helping people develop who they are, develop their talent, develop their character, develop who they are. And I think that is not going away. I think where we do that, how we do that, the context we do that, can look all kinds of crazy ways in the future. But I think that thing is not going to go away. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we remember really what we do, what is our profession calling us to do, and that's not going away. I mean, I think it is absolutely central in higher education, and again, I'm gonna leave it to you guys to figure that out because you're the next generation, so get creative.
All right, so we wanted to thank you, Dr. Dennis Sheridan. So, thanks for having us.
Thanks for coming over. It was fun.